So again, thank you so much everyone for joining us this evening to launch our No New Fossil Fuels campaign. My name is Anthony Field and I'm one of CCAN's Maryland organizers. I'm joined today by our digital campaigns coordinator, Tracy Miller, our general counsel, Anne Havemann, our voter engagement coordinator, Nora Winsler, and a few other speakers from some partner organizations and folks that have been volunteers with us for a very long time. So the goal of this event will be to discuss the state of fossil fuels in Maryland and to invite you to join our new statewide network and help the formation of issue-specific action teams. I want to start by saying that we've had 180 RSVPs for this event. I can't quite see where we're at the moment in terms of people who loaded in already, but I want you to know that this is just the beginning. We will continue to grow and learn together, and we want to hear from all of you, and we want everyone here interested in specific issues to collaborate and have conversations about how to approach solving those issues in their communities. Unfortunately, we do not have the capacity to have those individual and intimate conversations today, but as these teams are built and as this network is formed, they will be the perfect space for that. So as many of you probably know, fossil fuel infrastructure isn't just endangering our futures by way of accelerating and worsening the climate crisis. There are health impacts such as asthma, increased heart disease, increased danger to the adverse effects of coronavirus, increased emissions, gas leaks, indoor and outdoor air pollution, issues with the construction, and of course, adding to climate change. But fossil fuel infrastructure is also quite literally blowing our communities up and endangering our lives every single day. So I'm going to play a quick 15-second video. So bear with me for just a moment.
There was a deadly gas explosion in a Baltimore neighborhood today. 3 homes completely destroyed. Firefighters digging through the rubble after reports of children trapped. We know tonight that at least 6 people have been rescued. 1 woman did not survive. There's no word yet on the cause.
So I hope that was as scary and disheartening to you all as it was to me, especially when I woke up to see the news. That was just 2 weeks ago. There was a gas explosion which ripped through 3 homes in Northwest Baltimore, killing 2 people and seriously injuring at least 7 others, as mentioned in that news clip, some of which were children trapped in the rubble. There was a similar explosion that happened just last August in Columbia, Maryland. Some of you may have heard about. In fact, a recent state report just found Baltimore Gas and Electric at fault for failure to comply with safety standards at the site of the gas explosion. They were running their electrical lines in the same tunnels they had dug to run their gas lines. What's even more concerning is that there are around 250 sites in central Maryland that have the same fault and will now need to be redesigned and reconstructed. As a way to highlight just how prevalent that issue is, there was an explosion, another gas explosion just a few days ago in Corpus Christi, Texas. And I'm from Texas, and there is no shortage of gas infrastructure there. These explosions are not a unique and isolated incident, but an ever-present danger that comes with this sort of infrastructure. Now, despite these horrible tragedies, and many like it, multiple happen every year, our governor, Larry Hogan, is investing more than $100 million to kickstart a gas expansion across the state that endangers clean water in frontline communities while making climate change worse and putting profit over people's safety. We need to be united in order to collectively fight for stronger regulations, bold legislation, good governance, lower emissions, and ending our addiction and reliance to dangerous fossil fuels in Maryland. That is why we need a collaborative No New Fossil Fuels campaign now more than ever. After initially launching CCAN's No New Fossil Fuels campaign, we had worked diligently to protect all Maryland communities from the onslaught of fracked gas. Through legislation, legal action, grassroots mobilization, and more. This has included standing with communities as they continue to weather the possibility of the Potomac pipeline, listening to and working with communities that are boxed in by polluting and toxic fossil fuel infrastructure, and introducing various pieces of legislation like mandating a climate test for Maryland's Public Service Commission that would ensure climate is fully considered when evaluating new applications for energy infrastructure. We are proud of the work that has been done, but we know that more must be done. We must grow our opposition to fossil fuels by bringing in more community members, more business and landowners, more elected officials, and more grassroots organizations, and not just the ones that are already focused on climate change. One way we hope to do that is by creating what we're calling a statewide no new fossil fuels network that will be focused specifically on fossil fuels and issues surrounding them in Maryland. This statewide network will be used to ensure that progressive groups, vulnerable landowners, and communities across the state are informed, connected, and ready to act whenever the industry proposes new gas infrastructure or the state holds a hearing on an important new rule to better regulate the industry, or we need all hands on deck in support of new legislation. The No New Fossil Fuels Action Network will regularly provide tangible ways to act and protect our communities through petitions, opportunities to comment at hearings, lobbying opportunities, monthly calls, and the creation of action teams to address specific fights and more. I hope that you will join me, CCAN, and the other speakers at this event and people all across the state from varying communities and backgrounds in coming together to oppose the dangers that fossil fuels pose to our great state. Thank you again for joining us. Now I'd like to go ahead and introduce and hand it over to Tracy Cannon, our volunteer organizer heading up our work on the Potomac pipeline over in Western Maryland. So Tracy, please go ahead and unmute yourself and you are good to go.
Hi. Hey, can everyone hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yep. All right. Well, okay, I hope you're looking at I'm on the phone only because of my crappy West Virginia internet connection. I'm not actually in Western Maryland. I'm in Martinsburg, West Virginia, or Hedgesville, West Virginia, where the internet is really awful and frustrating. So I wish I could see you all still, but it wasn't happening. So anyway, the slide that you should be looking at is a sign that says, "Don't crack my water," or something like that. That's one of our first rallies in November of 2016 when they first started threatening our area. When the two gas companies, Columbia Gas and Mountaineer Gas, first started threatening our area with the Potomac pipeline and the connection to West Virginia. The group got started in September of 2016 because land agents were harassing and bullying local landowners into rights-of-way. And a guy named Russell Mokhyber, who's also a journalist, started the group after he heard about this problem with the landowners, that the landowners were having with the landmen harassing them. The second slide, I believe, is the Hands Across the Potomac event. Is that right, Anthony?
You're right.
Okay, good. That's in the summer of 2017, East Panhandle Protectors started working actively with CCAN and the Maryland Sierra Club and the other groups that are part of the Stop the Pipeline Under the Potomac group, including Howard Climate Action and Potomac already working with us. And we did the Hands Across the Potomac event in October of 2017, where we had 359 people standing on the bridge across the Potomac River in Shepherd regional unity. And, the Potomac pipeline remains blocked to this day, at least the Potomac pipeline portion of the pipeline. Unfortunately, today the FERC did re-permit the pipeline, as I'm sure Anne knows. We had tried to get them to not for 3 years, Today they renewed the FERC permit for the next 3 years. But the state of Maryland itself is still blocking the Potomac pipeline portion of the pipeline project, which is overall called the Eastern Panhandle Expansion Project. And it runs from just inside of Pennsylvania to Jefferson County. And unfortunately, at this time, it's almost complete. So let's see. Go back to slide 1, and we're looking at the right-hand side. And that's a permit hearing in October of 2018. By that time, the pipeline between Berkeley Springs and Martinsburg was almost complete. But the Mountaineer Gas was applying for a permit to build the Route 9 extension pipeline. And we had a rally outside of the hearing, and about 350 people attended that hearing as well, including some of you all from Maryland. And, well, that was a fun event. A guy named Sean Amos had us do a little dance at the rally, so that was great. Then, let's see. 3 should be a picture of a man sitting at a camp with a coffee cup. Have we got that?
Yes, ma'am.
Yep. Okay. Hey, thank you. Sorry, I can't see, so I have to ask. Once they started building the Route 9 extension, we had like a 3-month-long camp out on the property of a resident who lives right next to the rock wool facility that's being built. The rock wool facility, as you may know, is very much the whole purpose of the pipeline. Regardless of what Eastern Panhandle politicians keep saying, rock wool is the purpose for the pipeline. Rock wool would double Mountaineer Gas's business in the Eastern Panhandle region. So there's no way that they make up all this stuff and say it's for residents and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, the gaslighting is really pretty hard to tolerate. But at any rate, we were there at the camp for about 2 or 3 months, like from mid-March till the end of May. And the guy you see pictured there actually still has, he's still carrying on the weekly Fridays for Future rallies on Route 9 between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. And if you all wanted to, we could have a special day where you all come and join us. We'd love to have you. It's on the Route 9 bypass near the rock wool facility. And we have a whole bunch of banners, and we just take over the whole roadside every Friday at 11 a.m. And then we go out for coffee. Let's see. Slide 4 is also at the camp. That's a little celebration we had after we did what's called a slow roll. We got all our cars together and, you know, volunteers from the community to get out ahead of all the pipeline workers as they were coming to work, and drove like for about 2 or 3 miles, drove about 5 miles per hour, much to their frustration, and made them all, by the time they had to turn around and go the other way, we made them all about an hour late for work. So that was a lot of fun. Let's see. What's on slide 5? What's that a picture of?
The Mountaineer Gas article.
Oh, yes. Okay. Of course. Sorry. Mountaineer Gas now doesn't have a gas source for this pipeline, except for the already not inadequate source of gas that Martinsburg, West Virginia gets from Virginia. So they really want the Potomac pipeline connection, but they're not getting it. So they're talking now about building 2 or 3 compressed natural gas injection sites in Berkeley County to feed gas, to truck gas in the Marcellus Shale regions of Pennsylvania to Berkeley County, West Virginia, and feed it into the pipeline. And that is one of the things that we are currently fighting. And it looks like this could be another difficult fight with not a lot of support from officials. And if there is anything you all can do from Maryland, from the Maryland side, it would be much appreciated. I just got on, last night I was just on the news talking through to the Hagerstown TV station, and they completely got the story wrong. So that was a wasted opportunity. So we're still trying to get our message out about how unsafe these compressed natural gas sites could be, and the fact that they want to build 2 to 3 of them in a fairly close area near the Veterans Administration, the Veterans Affairs complex outside of Martinsburg, is troubling indeed. And, you know, they practically act like they're punishing us for, you know, blocking the Potomac pipeline. And, you know, I don't think that, you know, they're acting as if we have to accept one or the other. You know, well, you blocked the Potomac pipeline, so why can't you accept these CNG sites instead? Well, I don't want either one of those things. I vote for neither. And I call on you all, if there's any way you can, to help us block those sites. Mountaineer Gas is currently, has already asked the Berkeley County Solid Waste Authority for a site on the property of what used to be a landfill on what's called Grapevine Road. And they rejected that, which is good, but there's plenty of other commercial properties that are along the pipeline route that Mountaineer Gas is probably approaching or has already approached even as we speak. And we don't know how to get to those companies, whichever ones they might be, and stop them from making this deal. But that's the desperate last straw that, you know, last breath we're trying to make to stop this pipeline infrastructure and attempt to stop rock wool. But and I'd like to call on you all to help in some way if there's any way that can be done.
Great. Thank you so much, Tracy. I really appreciate it. Thank you for calling in and taking time to paint the picture of a united
Hey, puppers.
Yeah, I do hear the puppers. Alrighty, so now I'm going to go ahead and thank you, Tracy.
And I'm going to go back to where I can see people, I think. Maybe I can hear you guys. Okay, sorry about the technical difficulties, and thanks for letting me speak.
Thank you, Tracy. So now I'm going to hand it over to our general counsel here at CCAN, Anne Havemann, who's going to give you some legal updates on the current status of the Potomac pipeline.
I am, and those are my puppers, so I apologize. Hopefully they'll quiet down. So yeah, I'm going to talk briefly about where we are legally on the Potomac pipeline. And, you know, this can serve as lessons learned and, you know, creative ideas and, you know, ways that we can continue to engage and fight fossil fuels all across Maryland, fight gas projects all across Maryland. In terms of where we are legally on the Potomac pipeline, there are 2 tracks moving forward. There's a lawsuit, and there's also the extension request that Columbia has asked for. They've asked for 3 more years to build the Potomac pipeline. In terms of the lawsuit, so after, you know, much organizing, years and years of organizing and opposition, the Maryland Board of Public Works voted to deny the pipeline an easement to cross a public land. They did that in January 2019. And promptly sued the state, trying to seize that land through eminent domain. they took this issue to federal court in Baltimore, and we were there. This picture on the slide here is out in front of the district court, enacting, how we thought the court proceedings should go. And we thought that the court should rule in our favor, and the court did rule in our favor. Decided that a private company could not sue a state in federal court for eminent domain. So that issue is now moved up to the federal appeals court, and we're waiting for a hearing and a decision from that court. In the meantime, a similar case has been rising up through the ranks, through the court system in neighboring Pennsylvania. And the Third Circuit Court of Appeals has ruled in the state's favor. So essentially what the district court said, that a private company can't try to seize public lands through eminent domain, at least not in federal court. And so that's where we are right now. We're waiting on that. We're waiting for a hearing and a decision. We hope that the Fourth Circuit rules the same way that the Third Circuit did and rules in our favor. We also know that the pipeline company has appealed that Third Circuit decision to the U.S. Supreme Court. So we may, in fact, see this critical issue being heard at in the nation's highest court. So we'll continue to monitor that and, show up and hold our mock court proceedings and do everything that we can to bring attention to the issue. At the same time, and Tracy mentioned this, the company has asked for an extension request. They had initially 2 years to build the pipeline, and they haven't been able to make that because, as we know, pipelines are a bad investment for the state, they're a bad investment for the climate, and they're just a bad investment for the community. So Columbia's run out of time to build, and they've asked FERC for 3 more years. CCAN and the Potomac Riverkeeper Network, with help from Ryan, who you'll hear from in a second from the Environmental Integrity Project, we submitted extensive comments telling FERC why we thought that they shouldn't get that 3-year extension. They've found alternative supplies of gas to supply the Rockwool plant. 2 years ago, the environmental information, the environmental reviews that were conducted are now out of date 2 years later, and at least need to be redone to have a valid permit. And, in the meantime, we've learned a lot about climate change. The IPCC came out with a new report, and, we've just learned that it's even more urgent than we knew 2 years ago. And 2 years ago, we knew that it was urgent. So we made all those arguments. FERC, not unpredictably, ignored them and granted the extension request. And now we have to regroup and think of our next steps. But overall, that's where we are in our legal fight against the Potomac pipeline.
Great, thank you so much, Anne. Appreciate that update. Next, I'd like to go ahead and introduce Ryan Maher, who is a lawyer with the Environmental Integrity Project. Go ahead, Ryan.
Thanks, Anthony. Hi, everyone. My name is Ryan Maher. You almost got it, Anthony. It's not phonetic.
Sorry.
No worries.
I practiced in the mirror before this, too.
I know. I practice it, too. But as Anne said, I'm an attorney with the Environmental Integrity Project, an environmental nonprofit based in D.C. I started in January, and I moved down from Vermont. So while I know a few folks here, many of you I've yet to meet. I work on climate change issues in Maryland. More specifically, I work to reduce emissions of the greenhouse gas methane, which I'll be discussing tonight. Next slide, please. I'll keep it short. First, I'll say a little bit about methane, its consequences for climate change and its sources. But I really want to focus on 2 methane regulations that the Maryland Department of the Environment, which I'll be referring to as MDE, is currently putting together. Next. So some background on methane. Methane is the 2nd most dangerous greenhouse gas after carbon dioxide when it comes to causing climate change. in part because methane has a high global warming potential. This means that any given amount of methane, say 1 ton, that reaches the atmosphere warms the Earth much more than the same amount of carbon dioxide. Methane has a warming effect that's between 84 to 87 times that of the same amount of carbon dioxide over a 20-year period. It's also important to know that methane doesn't last long in the atmosphere. Methane emitted today will be in the atmosphere for about 12 years. Carbon dioxide can hang around for hundreds of years. Next slide. So methane spends less time in the atmosphere than carbon dioxide, but has more of an impact while it's up there. For these reasons, reducing methane emissions can reduce the rate of warming in the near term. This can offset some of the climate warming effect of carbon dioxide. It's the fastest, most effective way to flatten another important curve in our lives. Next slide. Some of the major sources of methane in Maryland and the nation are the natural gas industry, landfills, and agriculture in the form of cattle. The 2 Maryland regulations I'd like to discuss will focus on the first 2 sources, the natural gas industry and landfills. Next slide. MDE is currently seeking comments on a draft of the regulation that applies to the natural gas industry. The draft regulation focuses on natural gas leaks and releases at specific facilities involved in the transmission and storage of natural gas, like compressor stations. Natural gas is mostly methane. Overall, the regulation is strong and will position Maryland as a leader among states in this area of regulation. It'll eliminate between 600 and 5,000 metric tons of methane emissions per year. That's why the draft regulation deserves support. It's important that we get this on the books and get the benefit of those methane reductions now. However, I'll mention 2 major concerns with the draft. These are the reasons why, after it passes the regulation, MDE should amend it in a second round of rulemaking. First, the natural gas industry uses what are called pneumatic devices for a variety of functions related to the transportation of gas, like automatically managing pressure in the pipelines. Pneumatic devices are often powered by pressurized natural gas and release gas, meaning methane, into the air as part of their operations. The draft regulation requires operators of facilities with these devices to transition them from natural gas to either electricity or compressed air. This is great. The problem is that the regulation only requires operators to phase out pneumatic devices that operate by continuously leaking natural gas. Most, if not all, of the pneumatic devices in Maryland do not operate this way. Instead, most release natural gas only sporadically when they're operating. The draft regulation applies to the wrong type of device, which means it won't have much of an effect here. The second place where the regulation could improve relates to events called blowdowns. Blowdowns are releases of natural gas that clear out and relieve pressure on the system. They take place for safety or maintenance reasons. The draft regulation would be the first regulation in the nation to require operators to notify nearby communities when a blowdown is going to occur. It's important that we make this requirement official. However, operators only need to notify when the blowdown will release over 1 million standard cubic feet of gas. This is a very large amount of gas. Operators in Maryland will only be required to notify the public of a few blowdowns in total each year. Many blowdowns will take place without the public's knowledge. This number needs to be lower. Next slide, please. So MDE is holding a virtual hearing on the proposal next Monday, or this coming Monday, August 31st at 10 a.m. MDE is also accepting written comments on the draft regulation until 5 p.m. on Thursday, September 3rd. Before you scribble everything down, CCAN will be sending around an email that contains all of this information. They'll also be sending written comments that people can sign on to individually or as a group. So next slide, Anthony. The second regulation that I'd like to discuss relates to methane at landfills. Landfills produce a gas which contains methane when bacteria break down organic matter like food in the waste at the landfill. The EPA has a federal regulation that controls gas at landfills. The regulation requires landfills that emit a certain amount of gas to install a system of wells to collect the gas so that it can be flared or burned to produce energy. Burning the gas eliminates methane and other toxic air pollutants in the gas. The catch is EPA's regulation only applies to landfills that emit a very large amount of gas. See a pattern here? Only 2 of the 35 or more landfills in Maryland that generate gas are subject to the regulation. California has better regulations that apply to more landfills. MDE should adopt or improve upon California's landfill regulation. Next slide, Anthony. So MDE's regulation is in the early stages. MDE hasn't released a draft, but we'll be asking for public input. Anyone looking to learn more or to get involved should attend MDE's virtual stakeholder meeting at 10 a.m. on Monday, September 21st. Again, this will be in the email. And last slide, please, Anthony. And I'll just conclude by saying the No New Fossil Fuels campaign is making use of a wide range of strategies to address methane emissions. Pushing for the best regulations at the state level is an important part of this mix. Regulations like the 2 we've talked about start to shift the burden and costs of emitting methane back onto the natural gas industry, hopefully with the effect of deterring new development. Also, getting forward-thinking regulations on the books provides an example that other states can draw on, which could result in improved regulations elsewhere. Thank you. I'll be facilitating one of the breakout sessions if anyone has questions or wants to talk about this more.
Great. Thank you so much, Ryan. All right, next I'm going to hand it off to our volunteer organizer on the Eastern Shore, Susan Olsen.
Hi, everyone. I have a question for you. What happened to the 200-mile Delmarva pipeline? Do you remember that? Okay, well, the powers that be decided to segment it. The first project after segmentation is the Delmar pipeline. This is an extension in Somerset County. And what it's proposed is a 6.8 miles of 10-inch diameter pipeline. It's supposed to be installed in the right-of-way parallel to Route 13 from Salisbury to a little town called Eden. There will be 5 crossings of water resources, and it's created by the crossings will be created by horizontal directional drilling and open trench installation methods. The thing to know here is that the Board of Public Works will vote on the wetland license on September 23rd. Okay. These are 2 maps that show the, this slide shows the entirety of the project in 2 maps. The left map shows the start of the project in Salisbury, with the first half of the pipeline and the second half on the right ending just north of Eden. And there are 6 blue boxes, blue squares, where the proposed water resource crossings will be. And Anthony, can you point them out a little bit? Or there's 1, 2, 2. Great, thank you. Okay. All right. Then there is another part of this which will be situated. It's the Chesapeake Utilities Project. It will include 11 miles of new 8-inch diameter pipeline. It will extend fracked gas to the Eastern Correctional Institution, otherwise known as ECI, and the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, UMES. It will cross wetlands and waters, including the Minokan River, Taylor Branch, and Kings Creek. And just an aside here, the Eastern Correctional Institution is one of Maryland's largest state prisons. Its population is about 2,800 male inmates. And the University of Maryland has close to 5,000 students enrolled. So these 2 anchor customers would be significant users of fracked gas from the pipeline. Oh, and important to know is that there will be, our MDE has scheduled a virtual public hearing for 6 p.m. on September 17th. Okay. All right, this is a picture of nuisance flooding in Somerset County. Anthony, go back. Okay, it's a picture of nuisance flooding. Okay, there's a projected 2.1 foot sea level rise by 2050 along Maryland's shorelines and 3.7 foot by 2100. 76,000 jobs are directly vulnerable to a 3-foot sea level rise, and 1.6 million jobs are supported by Maryland's coastal industries as of 2013. Okay, now. All right, this is a picture from Hooper's Island. Hooper's Island is sinking beneath the Chesapeake Bay, and you can't really see any pine trees, but there are a lot of pine trees around. They're kind of like the last survivors, and they won't survive the saltwater exposure. So now there are so many stumps in the water that they're a hazard to fishermen and other boaters who have to maneuver around them. Okay, next. Okay, this picture is from the commentary film that Tom Horton and Dave Harp did called High Tide in Dorchester. And Holland Island, about 100 years ago, had about 360 people. It was a very prosperous community. They had a very nice, they were earning good livings, okay? But as the erosion and sea level rise gradually wore away the island, it has all but disappeared now. And this is the last remaining house on Holland Island, and it was swept into the sea in 2010. Okay, next. All right, the Blackwater National Wildlife Refuge is in the city of Cambridge in Dorchester County. You can see the dying pine trees again. Scientists are working to help the marshes spread to other locations around the refuge because as the water rises, the lowest lying marshes will become submerged and die. Okay, next. On Roden Island, this cemetery is falling into the sea. The roads need constant repair and forests are dying. New homes are being built at least a foot higher than they used to be. School buses are having a hard time getting down some of the roads, and it is a difficult and I imagine expensive situation for the residents. Okay, next one. I'm hearing some interference. Is that coming from me or? No?
It sounds fine on my end.
Does it sound okay? Okay, good. All right. This is a picture of sunny day flooding in Salisbury. And there's been a lot of flooding in Salisbury, and also flash flooding has also increased. I have had the displeasure of being caught in a couple of them. It was very frightening because the water rose so fast that and so high that I was worried about my brakes getting wet. We all know that pipelines tend to leak pollutants and greenhouse gases. As this kind of flooding increases as a result of climate change, the danger of pollutant leaks by the pipelines escalates. Okay, so just think about it, you know, pipelines leak and then there's all this flooding and it's going to take away the pollutants into our probably water table. Okay, next one. And this is the last one. This is a scene from the beginning of the commentary film, High Tide in Dorchester. Here, the narrator, Tom Horton, is standing on a piece of land where he played baseball as a kid. This is how much the water has risen in his lifetime. And Tom is a very tall man, by the way. Dorchester County is already experiencing the future that increasingly faces coastal areas worldwide. It is frequently called the canary in the coal mine because climate change often happens here first. Dorchester is the 4th largest of Maryland's 23 counties by land area, but it will drop to the 14th place by 2100 or sooner even, as waters rise and erosion worsens. I cannot recommend this film enough. It's excellent. It's about 55 minutes and you can see it online at MPT's website. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Susan. Thank you for joining us. All right, next I'd like to go ahead and pass it over to my friend Alicia Coleman, who is a hub coordinator with the Sunrise Movement Silver Spring.
Hello, that's me. Hi, my name is Alicia, she, they pronouns. As Anthony mentioned, I'm a hub coordinator at Sunrise Silver Spring. I got into climate work a bit less than 2 years ago and helped start Sunrise Silver Spring a year ago, hoping to help up the representation of young people of color in the climate movement. One of the primary reasons that I care so much about Maryland's plans to increase our reliance on fossil fuels is due to their significant effects on the health and well-being of our communities, and that's what I'm here to talk about today. So first off, health and safety impacts. I'm just going to read right from these slides because they're so beautifully done. First off, increased risk of premature births, birth defects, respiratory disease like asthma, and cancer, leukemia. Gas is associated with health and environmental hazards and reduced social welfare at every stage of its life cycle. Construction and operation of gas infrastructure is linked to the contamination of ground and surface water, air pollution, noise and light pollution, radiation releases, ecosystem damage, and earthquakes. Transmission and storage of gas can result in fires and explosions. One or more pipeline explosions occur every year in the US. So now that you know those points, here's some examples. So if we can take a look at the effect that air pollution can have on a person's health, this is a very relevant example. This, as you can see, I'm sure, but this article says that new research has linked air pollution to higher coronavirus death rates. So take into account the effect that air pollution can have on somebody's health and take into account which areas tend to be the most polluted. Next, please, thank you. So this is what's going on the home front. So you can see here, we've had multiple pipeline explosions in the Baltimore area. I'm sure I don't really need to explain this to most of you, but Baltimore is home to a lot of marginalized people who have been failed by companies that rely on fracked gas. And they're the ones who tend to be hit first. So solving climate justice means fighting for social justice. There is no social justice without climate justice and vice versa. This is a little quote from CCAN's mission statement that I'm gonna just read out. From South Baltimore to Appalachia to coastal Virginia, people of color and low-income people are often hardest hit by climate change and the polluting industries driving it. We are committed to a transition to clean energy that builds a better future for everyone. That means supporting the leadership of communities on the front lines, supporting policies rooted in both science and justice, and supporting other fights for racial, economic, and environmental justice in our region, end quote. So as a young person of color in the climate movement, this is really important to me. Climate justice is social justice. You can't have one without the other. And we've seen time and time again the injustices and the burdens that have been dropped on the heads of our marginalized frontline communities. Fossil fuel companies have a rich history of leaving people out to sea without help. It's our responsibility to protect frontline communities, and in doing so, protect everybody else on the planet. Take the explosions in Baltimore that we looked at earlier. Those explosions aren't going to happen in the rich neighborhoods and by the governor's house because the people who make their living off fracked gas know the dangers and know which communities' health and safety they value more than others. As an example of their commitment to the environment, CCAN has been advocating that MDE include environmental justice concerns in its rulemakings for years. Most recently, CCAN has been trying to get MDE to add a provision to its draft compressor station rule to ensure that environmental justice concerns are addressed in the siting of any new facilities. Neighboring Virginia provides a good example of provision law that requires the state environmental agency to consider, quote, the sustainability of the activity to the area in which it is located, end quote. This provision was instrumental to ensuring that Virginia regulators conducted a comprehensive review of a compressor station proposed for the historic community of Union Hill in Buckingham County, Virginia. Union Hill is a community settled by free blacks and former enslaved people around the time of the Civil War. Many community members felt they were targeted by the operator of the compressor station. The first permit the board issued for the compressor station was vacated by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit on 2 grounds, one of which was a failure to properly consider environmental justice. Quote, environmental justice is not merely a box to be checked, and the board's failure to consider the disproportionate impact on those closest to the compressor station resulted in a flawed analysis, end quote. All too often, the public health and environmental burdens of fracked gas infrastructure fall on the low-income communities and communities of color that are most vulnerable to their impacts. CCAN agrees with the court that environmental justice is not just a box to be checked, and they are working to ensure that MDE fully considers environmental justice in compressor station siting, and that the EJ issues are always a part of their campaigns. that's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you so much to CCAN and to Anthony for letting me do this, and thank you guys for hearing me speak.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Next, I don't think she needs much of an introduction, but we do have Delegate Lorig Charkoudian here from District 20, Montgomery County, to talk to you guys for a few minutes. Delegate, would you like to go ahead and unmute yourself?
Okay, let's see, here we go. Okay. Hi there. It is great to be here. It's a real honor. Thank you for inviting me to join you. And I'm scrolling through and looking at everybody who is on this call, the Zoom, and just want to start by thanking everyone for their activism and their commitment to climate justice, to ending the use of fossil fuels, and to preserving our planet in a way that is committed to justice. And I know a lot of you have been working on these issues for many, many years. So just want to start by thanking you for that. I'll talk a little bit about a couple of pieces of legislation that I had last year, have this coming year, a couple other pieces of legislation that I know are potentially coming, and then we're going to have an opportunity to go into much more detail in the legislative breakout session. So I'll start by talking about the Public Service Commission's climate. Let me back up. For folks who don't know me, I serve on the Economic Matters Committee. We have and on the Public Utilities Subcommittee. So we have all of the energy legislation comes through our committee, and I have been in the legislature for a year and a half. And we've had some really crucial climate legislation. We passed the Clean Energy Jobs Act last year, and then there is, of course, so much more work to be done. So this past year, I had the bill to require the Public Service Commission to consider climate and labor issues as they're making their decisions. And I'll just highlight that it's kind of absurd that we have a Public Service Commission that is making all of our decisions about energy infrastructure and is not required to consider climate. There is a requirement to consider the environment, usually in localized pollution, but even that is a flawed system in that from an environmental justice perspective, it doesn't consider cumulative impacts. It just considers each individual piece of infrastructure in the certificate for public need and convenience process. So the bill that we had last year that we'll be bringing back this coming year requires that climate is explicitly considered, both the implications of the infrastructure on climate as well as the implications of climate change on the infrastructure. So to the point that was made about the flooding that will make the natural gas pipelines even more dangerous, that would be the kind of thing that could get considered in the context of this legislation. The other thing that the bill requires the Public Service Commission to consider is labor and labor standards. And I think one of the things as we're looking at the broader justice issues and building a new kind of an economy, one that's not based in fossil fuels, we've talked a little bit about the need to make sure it's based in justice and environmental justice and considering frontline communities and investing in frontline communities. And it's also really important that it's one that builds really good, solid jobs and union jobs wherever possible, as unions play a really important role in the democratic process. And so we're looking to really build out new clean energy jobs that are good, high quality jobs that create opportunities for folks in the frontline communities and our union jobs. And so with that in mind, I'll move off of the PSC bill, just to mention that one is coming back and would welcome people's support. And I'll talk a little bit about another approach as we're looking at how do we, stop fossil fuel infrastructure and move towards clean energy infrastructure. One of the key pieces that we're going to have to grow in the state is our geothermal infrastructure. And so that's ground source heat pumps. Ground source heat pumps are a really solid way to electrify buildings, which is something that we need to do. We're going to move away, realistically, have a plan to move away from fracked gas in our buildings, in our residential, commercial, and state buildings. And so at this point in the state, ground source heat pumps are sort of the use, they're significantly underutilized in the state compared to what's possible. And they create a great opportunity to, from an efficiency perspective and from a clean energy perspective, to move away from natural gas. So I'll have a bill coming up and they also create really good jobs. So I'll have a bill coming up this year that will grow the geothermal usage in the state and focus on specifically making sure that we grow it in a way that it's that geothermal is deployed, prioritizing low-income individuals and low-income communities. I'll just mention two other bills quickly. One is energy efficiency. I think folks probably know if we're going to pull off this transition away from fossil fuels, we have to do it in a way that we have to sort of start with or prioritize efficiency and conservation. We have to use less at the same time as we change the energy that we're using. And so I had a bill last year that will be bringing it back that's focused on energy efficiency for low-income households. Right now, the way that we do energy efficiency in the state, we've made good progress, but it's been very inequitable. And so the individuals who struggle most to pay their bills and struggle most with indoor air quality are the least likely to benefit from our efficiency policies. And so I have a bill that will focus on low-income energy efficiency. And we did succeed last year to some extent in moving money out of the natural gas expansion fund and into low-income energy efficiency. And we're going to continue to work in that direction. And finally, I'll mention that there's also, we are really trying to highlight how dangerous the natural gas infrastructure is. 4 years before the tragic explosion in Baltimore this year, there was an explosion in the Flower Branch Apartments in Silver Spring in my district, which killed 7 people and left 64 homeless, and a lot of people lost everything. And so we have been looking at both how do we not only end the fossil fuel expansion, but even in the short term, highlight the dangers and keep people as safe as possible, while at the same time looking at electrifying buildings and moving off of natural gas overall. And so there'll be a couple bills. I had a bill last year. There'll be a few bills this coming year that'll look at how do we sort of stop the expansion, invest any investment in fossil fuel, in natural gas, into keeping what we have safe, at the same time planning to move these homes as quickly as possible into geothermal, other electrification, air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, but away from the fracked gas, both from a physical safety, an indoor air quality, as well as climate. And so I think you'll see several bills that'll sort of fall in that broader area. And I think that's my time. So I'll stop there and I'll take more questions and talk more about all of those possibilities in the breakout session.
Thank you so much, Lorig. And yes, as Lorig mentioned, she is going to be in the legislative breakout sessions, and we're actually going to transition into the breakouts right now. Format is, and I apologize for not mentioning this at the beginning, is if you'd like to ask a question, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and putting a star in the chat. That way I know to, call upon you so that we can kind of have a queue started here. And Lorig, I want to give you a moment to dive deeper into anything or say any additional thoughts if you had anything coming off of your initial statements earlier in the call.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll just, I think I got to talk about most of the bills. I think I mentioned building electrification as a really important piece of what we need to do to move away from fossil fuels. It's not clear exactly what that legislation is going to look like. There's a lot of talk about if we need to change the way Empower is our energy efficiency structure in the state, if we need to change Empower so that it allows for fuel switching away from fracked gas. There's a couple, the geothermal is a way to move towards electrification. There's a few other things that could potentially support electrification. So I think I'll just kind of put that on folks' radar. That's something that people are thinking about. Another piece that folks are thinking about, if people have been following the Eastern Shore pipeline issue, what we've seen out of it is the way that MES, which now there's a lot of controversy around MES, Maryland Environmental Services, which is this quasi-public agency, and you probably have seen it in the news recently around the issue of the payout that its executive director received before becoming Hogan's chief of staff. So that's kind of been the controversy. But the broader issue around MES is that they're sort of structured in a way that they can get around Maryland's procurement rules. That they're not really accountable in the way other agencies would be accountable. And so it was an MES procurement process that led to the purchasing of the fracked gas for UMES and ECI that is then incentivizing this additional pipeline on the Eastern Shore. So there's a lot to that. I know there's another breakout that's fully focused on that, but I'll just mention there are some of us who are looking at legislation that would really address this sort of loophole in our procurement processes that allowed that to move forward. Now that wouldn't help with the pipeline that's already moving forward in those processes. There's other ways we have to address that, but it could potentially support preventing something like that in the future. So that's on the radar. And then the other thing I know that we will be seeing come back, and I think it's going to be a tough fight, but the price on carbon will likely come back. It's come in a couple years in a row now, and of course that would, by pricing carbon, that would create a significant change in the cost-benefit analysis and shifting away from fossil fuels. So those are a couple things that I know are on the radar that we're likely to see, and there's always a whole bunch of stuff that comes through, and so if there's a particular area of interest folks are interested in, I can either tell you what we've seen or what we're likely to see in the upcoming session or two.
Great, thank you. So we do have a question from Diana, and then after her, Bruce has a question as well. So Diana, go ahead.
My question was exactly about the MES process. Who, I mean, and you mentioned it. So I would very much like to know what legislators would be very effective to talk to about learning more about what procurement rules the MES is expected to comply with, what their rules are, and bringing them into compliance with Maryland environmental and climate regulations. And do we need legislation for that, which I think you are suggesting that we do need? And if we do need legislation, who should we be talking to?
Yeah, so I just say that there were two things that happened in the procurement process for UMES and ECI. And basically the contract, the RFP that was put out was for 10 years worth of fracked gas. So rather than doing sort of a cost benefit analysis of what are the energy needs and what are the various energy processes, what energy solutions are there. There was instead a decision to go with fracked gas, and then an RFP went out for 10 years of a contract for 10 years of fracked gas. So part of the issue had to do with the fact that it was MES, but the other part is that normally a several $1 million contract can't be signed without either the legislature or the Board of Public Works approving it. But because the gas is considered a commodity, state agencies are allowed to sign contracts for commodities without it going through BPW or the legislature. And so there was actually sort of two levels of loopholes that allowed for this particular abominable process to go forward. And I would say that we're looking at a couple of those. David Fraser Hidalgo and I have been looking at this whole Eastern Shore pipeline issue and raising the issues around it within the legislature for a while now. And I think, I'm not sure which one of us is likely to put that legislation in, but he would be another person that you could talk to if you're interested. He had the bill ultimately that banned fracking in the state. So he's very interested in the issue. And the other person who knows a decent amount about MES is Mark Coleman, because he's on the budget committee. He's the chair of the subcommittee that oversees the MES budget to the extent that there is oversight. And if you saw the Maryland Matters piece this morning about MES, it quoted both Mark and myself. So you could talk to me, but Mark would be another person, and you do, Diana. It's always good to see you and to talk to you. But Mark Coleman and David Fraser Hidalgo are also really interested in the issue. And I'm gonna go ahead and put my contact information in the chat too for folks who want to reach out to me.
Great. Climate Justice Wing is planning to talk to both of them.
Good.
And we have a date for Fraser Hidalgo.
So yeah, I would add that to that conversation. Tell him I sent you.
Thanks.
Great. Alrighty. Thank you, Diana. Bruce, and then David Saunders will be next.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony. I have a question that could go to you or perhaps to Delegate Charkoudian. Last time I was lobbying in Annapolis at lobby night, there were a good 10 bills or so that CCAN and Sierra Club were pushing, and many of them were pretty good. I hope a lot of them are coming back. Do you have a sense now, either one of you, as to whether most of the bills that were up last year will be back this time?
Lorig, you can go first if you'd like.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'll mention that not a single climate bill passed last session.
I know.
Now, we had a pandemic and we ended early, but we did pass 800 bills or something like that in that time frame that we had. And so it is, it's pretty devastating that we didn't
Right.
have any climate bills. So I think there will be, there's a lot of interest amongst many of the legislators to make sure we get something passed this year. I think you'll probably see a lot of those. I can't remember off the top of my head what those 10 were. I know the PSC climate test bill was one of them. And as I said, I'm bringing that one back.
Right.
If you mention a couple of them, I can tell you if I know if they're coming back.
One of them that really lasted the longest, even during the pandemic shutdown, people were hoping to find a way to pass it, was a transportation bill. They wanted to get a lot more money to to trains and buses and the various modes of transportation funded by the state of Maryland, because a lot of those budgets are laughably low. And even before the pandemic, there were bus breakdowns all the time and other things like that. So I am interested in that among the variety of other things. Do you know about that bill?
Yeah, I suspect it will. Is that Brooke Learman's bill? Maybe
I didn't hear your response clearly.
I said, was that Brooke Learman's bill?
I don't know. I'm from Hyattsville, and I did talk to Senator Pinsky about it. So
okay.
I know he was interested and hoping to find a way for the legislature to get back to it.
Sure. Yeah, I'm fairly certain there'll be a big sort of transit-related bill.
Yeah.
So yes, I don't know, because I don't know which specific bill you're talking about. I can't speak to. But
I'm sorry, I don't have the numbers in front of me.
That's okay. Well,
there were a good 10 bills. I'm hopeful that we will get information from CCAN, by December or so that we have a pretty good idea what bills we can be pushing for in lobby night. I work at, or I should say work with a Unitarian Universalist church, and we do a lot of letter writing for different bills. So I'm hopeful that, there'll be the same kind of communication that there has been in the past with regard to upcoming legislation.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously kind of echoing what the delegate just said is we were very disappointed that we weren't able to get more legislation passed, climate legislation passed last session, but we made very good progress on bills like the PSC bill in particular.
Right.
And, I know there is interest, obviously the delegate said she's planning on bringing that one back. So just a little insight onto the inner workings of CCAN at the moment. So we are obviously having those conversations now. We're speaking, with internally, we're hearing from activists and groups like you. One hope from this session is to also hear a little bit about the back and forth from the grassroots and the delegate to help inform legislative decisions as well in our future campaigns. But right now we are currently operating without a Maryland policy director. Our former director, Stephen Hershkowitz, actually moved to Seattle with his partner. So which is a wonderful move. We're very happy for him, but we're looking to fill that position, and that's slowing down our process a little bit a little bit more than it normally would be. But we're definitely having those conversations, and we certainly will communicate with you guys as best as we can and have been. And we will have those decisions well before legislative session so that we can prepare for lobby nights and letter writing campaigns and stuff like that.
Sure. Thank you, Anthony.
No problem, Bruce. I just want to mention real quick, we're running short on time. We're going to end this breakout at 8:20. So just as a heads up, but David, you do have the next question.
Okay, my question is, I'm taking the course at and I would recommend it to everyone, the Association of Climate Change Officers, which is actually supported quite a bit, I believe, by the Maryland Department of Natural Resources, and I would recommend that funding be continued. But in that course of taking those classes, we learned to do certain calculations, and my question is, has anyone calculated the pipeline versus electricity, so gas versus electricity for the Eastern Shore? And there's a book that's come out recently called Rewiring America, and they sort of give a methodology for doing that, how you would actually do that kind of calculation. On the one hand, you can look at all the cost and benefit of the gas. Another time, you can look at the cost and benefit of doing everything electrical. Has anyone done that as we make these decisions, as the legislation makes these decisions?
No, it's a great question because, and I think in a very specific to the UMES and ECI contract, a decision to sign a 10-year contract for gas that would then create basically the guaranteed market that brings in the rest of the pipeline, that then transitions all those homes and all those businesses onto gas. We've asked that question, like, did you do a financial and a climate cost benefit analysis of what the other options are? Because what they keep saying is that I think at UMES, they're using, it's biomass or propane, and then at the other one, in ECI, it's propane or biomass. So whatever, they're moving from sort of a petroleum-based heating fuel to natural gas, and then from a biomass to gas. And so they're saying that's an improvement. And it sort of is in a very localized way. But when you're building new infrastructure, of course, you're locking it in for another 30 years. So it's really not. It would actually be preferable to stay on one of those other dirty fuels for a few years while you figure out how to get to geothermal, solar, and storage or something else. So no other assessment was done, and they've confirmed that. Maryland Energy Administration and MES have confirmed that fact, that they didn't do another assessment there. And I don't think, there's another interesting question that you're asking about the broader planning for the shore overall or for the state overall. Has there been any kind of planning on that? And the answer is no, to my knowledge. In one of the questions, actually one of the pieces I'm thinking about adding to the Public Service Commission bill is the PSC was supposed to, a couple of years ago, the PSC was supposed to do distribution planning, really looking at the distribution grid, specifically the electric distribution grid, what would have to change in it in order to bring on a lot more distributed energy, a lot more solar and wind. And they never did. And so that's not exactly the question you're asking. I mean, you're asking about like doing sort of this cost benefit shifting analysis, but there is a need to do broader statewide planning. It is entirely possible to get to 100% renewables, but it's got to be done in a strategic and planned way. And it requires investments in the grid, both the distribution grid, the transmission grid. It requires putting the storage in the right places, getting demand response right, getting efficiency right. And there isn't in the state right now any sort of planning at that level so that we can align our policies. And the last thing I would just say that ought to be in that bigger planning is, to the extent that we're developing biogas, capturing methane in anaerobic digestion or other sources, targeting that biogas only to the places where it's hardest to electrify, right? Like only to the long haul trucking or only to the industrial uses that are hard to electrify. And so that's got to be part of that planning as well. And we would do much better to make our policies if we had that kind of bigger picture plan in place. And we don't.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. So I apologize for the shortness of that. We want to hear from everybody, and I'm sure Lorig wants to hear from everybody as well. Sorry, the delegate. So feel free to email me at anthony@chesapeakeclimate.org with any questions or suggestions or anything like that. Of course, we're going to be in communication through all our normal channels, email, social media, what have you, about legislation that CCAN, pushes forward. And Laura, do you have any final things you want to say in these last 12 seconds?
Yeah, my email is in the chat, and so feel free to reach out if you have other thoughts or questions.
Great. Thank you.
I would look at what the building work group of the mitigation working group is doing.
And I would say with the whole regulations process and really all of this is taking this information and bringing it out to the community, because I honestly feel right now is there's really not enough outreach to the community, telling them what the important information is and how they should act. So that's pretty much all I have to say.
Great. Thanks, Justin. Lauren, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Can you guys hear me with this, or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. My name is Lauren Brown, and some of you guys are familiar faces. Hi, Justin. I interned at CCAN a couple years ago, but I graduated from Maryland with a bachelor's in environmental policy and psychology. But I'm crazy for the climate, and I'm just trying to do everything I can to help. And methane's a really big thing, so I'm really excited to hear some of your ideas and strategies and be of use in whatever way that I can.
Great. Thanks, Lauren. John Mikusik, if I pronounced that right?
You did perfectly. Yes, absolutely.
Great. All right.
I'm calling from Towson. I live in South Baltimore County, about 3 blocks away from Baltimore City. I have been a volunteer and a member of CCAN since about 2015. When we were engaged in the fight over Cove Point and the natural gas liquefaction facility there. I know relatively little about methane, which is why I chose this session. I'd like to learn more. And my question is, or a question is, the relationship between the regulations and rulemaking and legislation that I think we passed on greenhouse gas limits. And so does that legislation give us greater leverage in terms of the regulatory process?
Great. Yeah, and just for everybody, in terms of questions, I think maybe the best way to make sure everybody's questions get logged with us are by typing them in the chat or using the raise your hand feature. But John, I appreciate you raising your question now. And maybe that'll be the one we start with once we get the go ahead and we know that everybody's in the session. But for now, Joyce, Joyce, can you hear me?
Yes.
If you would like to introduce yourself next. Hi, I haven't seen you for a while. I hope all is well.
Yes, I'm Joyce Dowling. I live in Brandywine, Maryland. I'm right next door to where they're planning to build the 5th power plant in the area. And this is a majority African-American community. So we're trying to keep this power plant from being built. Is that a good enough introduction?
That's great. Thanks, Joyce.
Yeah, I read that article in the New York Times that had the photographs of methane. I don't know, were they real photographs of methane escaping from the power plants in Texas?
Is that the one about the EPA rollback of the natural gas industry rules that came out a couple weeks ago?
Oh no, it was a couple months ago at least, maybe 4 or 5 months ago, and they were using a camera that actually captured the heat of the methane, or the gas of the methane.
Yeah, the FLIR camera. Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So I've been told that everybody's here. I don't want to skip the introductions for everybody else, but maybe you can introduce yourself if you have a question, and that way we can keep the introductions going while getting into some of the content. And we have about 16 minutes. I'll let you know when we have 10 and when we have 5, approximately. So again, my name is Ryan Maher. I'm with the Environmental Integrity Project. Anne Havemann with CCAN is also, she's in my bottom top right screen. I guess that's probably not true for everybody, so pointing doesn't make much sense. But so I'll quickly repeat the gist of what I said a few minutes ago, but really I would like to get to questions. And for questions, if you could just put them in the chat, or I believe there's a raise your hand feature. Chat might be easiest because, to be honest, I'm more familiar with that. So really there are 2 regulations that at the state level in Maryland that I've been focused on. One that addresses the natural gas industry and methane leaks and releases from the transmission and storage segments of the natural gas industry. And then another that deals with landfill methane. So the natural gas industry regulation is a strong regulation as presented. It sets precedent, it's groundbreaking in some respects, and then it's also competitive with the best regulations out there in other respects. So really the approach that we recommend, that we've considered best, is to advocate for the regulation in the form that it is in, to make sure that those requirements get on the books and are made official, but then push MDE in a second round of rulemaking to address some major issues. And we have assurances from MDE that they will actually come back around and address these issues in a second round of rulemaking. Through the pre-regulation process. We got those assurances. And yeah, turning to the concerns with the regulation, there's the pneumatic device issue, which is essentially a matter of applicability. So the draft regulation regulates the wrong kinds of pneumatic devices. There are those devices that operate by releasing gas continuously, and some that release gas intermittently just when they're operating. There are only intermittent pneumatic devices in Maryland, yet the regulation applies to continuous bleed devices. So this is really a matter of the right intention, but missing the mark. Oh, thanks, Joyce. Thanks for sharing that. And then there's the blowdown notification issue. So as I said, this is groundbreaking. This is a new regulation in terms of notifying the community of a blowdown event. There's no regulation in the US like it. But the problem is it only requires notification of blowdowns that are massive. And of the facilities that we have data on, this would require 2 notifications per year. And lowering that threshold, you would have 20 or more notifications per year. And this is just straight natural gas that's released. So these are volatile organic compounds, methane, greenhouse gas concerns, as well as air quality concerns. Yes, so thanks, Justin. I'll answer questions that I can as they come up. So the current threshold in the regulations is for 1 million standard cubic feet. A blowdown that's planned, that's 1 million standard cubic feet. We looked at the Cove Point LNG facility and 1 compressor station facility. Those are the only 2 facilities that we could find data on in terms of how large the blowdowns are. And between the 2 of them, there's 2 blowdowns that would be required per year, approximately. So that threshold is very high. Yeah, and just so I don't spend too much time on this, I'll turn to the landfill methane regulation. Landfills produce gas. When waste decomposes, that gas is about half methane. There's a federal regulation in place, but it only applies to landfills that emit a large amount of methane. There's a California regulation on the books that applies to many more landfills, basically applies to landfills that emit less gas. So we would encourage MDE to either adopt or improve upon, ideally, the California regulation. But since that's in the early stages, I would encourage anybody interested in that to attend a virtual stakeholder meeting at 10 a.m. on Monday, September 21st. And all the written comment information, the virtual hearing information for both regulations will be in an email that CCAN will send around on Friday, as well as comments that individuals or groups can sign on to, petition style, regarding the natural gas industry regulation. So I would really prefer to just be answering questions. I feel like that would be the best way to spend our time. So maybe we'll start with John, since John came out of the gate with a question. And I don't know, Anne, would you, I think maybe you would be better suited to answer that question in terms of the legislative angle.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. And it's a great question, and it's right. You know, we passed the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Act, I think, in 2009, and then reauthorized it in 2016 with, you know, higher reduction requirements. MDE has to model how they're going to meet those reduction requirements, and part of their model includes these rulemakings that they're doing, the landfill methane rulemaking and the compressor station rulemaking. So these are included in their plan for reducing greenhouse gas emissions in Maryland. And, you know, so we not only can we hold them to their commitment, but they also need to be held to that plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, you know, in Maryland through these rulemakings. So yes, it does give us leverage. It's, you know, I would maybe venture to say it's the reason that they're promulgating these rules. And, you know, we can continue to cite to those rules, or to the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Act, as we, you know, push them to implement the strongest possible rules, and then, you know, go beyond what they've done. Right now, you know, they're doing two major rulemakings. You know, this compressor station rulemaking, again, sets nationwide precedent. It's the strongest in some ways in the whole country. They're not required to do it other than the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Act. So that's a little bit about how those two interplay.
Great. So I see Liz dropped a question in the chat regarding the natural gas industry regulation and the second round of rulemaking that we discussed. So she asked, did they give a timeline for revisiting these issues? This process is basically finalizing the regs for now, correct? Yeah, that's right. So what we have been told is that MDE will finalize the regs as written, essentially, and we have not been given a definite timeline for when the second round of amendments would take place. I mean, we would certainly put pressure on them continuously. I know it's not necessarily the most satisfying answer, but at the same time, especially with COVID, there was a lot up in the air when these discussions were taking place. And it also wasn't clear whether they would be finishing the natural gas industry regulation and only then moving on to the landfill methane regulation. So the fact that they're kind of undertaking two at once is a good sign, but I can't give you a clear answer in terms of, yes, they promised to revisit the regulation 9 months from now, but I can say we'll be putting continuous pressure on them to do so. And the assurances were pretty concrete, so we'll hold them to it.
And that's what this group is for, you know, as we create a, you know, what group that is engaging on MDE's rulemaking, we, you know, not only push them to implement the strongest rule, but do it as fast as possible. So we're certainly going to be relying on all of you to help us hold MDE accountable to that promise.
Great. And then Liz had a second part to her question, then I'll turn to Justin's question. And you're talking about global warming potential there, I take it, Liz, where you ask, are they using the 20-year or the 100-year conversion? I'm not exactly clear.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I just, you know, when Anne mentioned the Reggie numbers, like, you know, what are they using? Because I think at MDE, at one time, even for the methane, are they using 20 or 100? Because I know that they were counting their climate plan. They don't count anything that happens out of state. So all the fracking out of state doesn't count. So they only consider burning gas the reduction, not. So I didn't know what they were doing for the 20 or 100-year conversion.
Sure. And in terms of the GGRA, do you know which converted? I'm not as.
Yeah, I do. This is true. When MDE reports on greenhouse gas emissions, under EPA and under international rules, they are using the 20-year, they're using the 25. So they're using the 100-year, they're using the lower global warming potential that doesn't show the actual effect, you know, the true effect of methane emissions. And they are, in fact, and I checked this when they told me, required to do that under international and, you know, federal law. When they're doing their internal calculations, though, and when they've presented on this, they're using the higher global warming potential. We've pushed them and pushed them and pushed them on it so much that they've, you know, when I saw it, I was shocked, but they are doing it. The other part of that is our Climate Solutions Act, or now to be renamed Climate Stimulus Act, required MDE to use that higher global warming potential. So we can not only has our advocacy gotten them to internally use that higher GWP, we're trying to mandate it through the legislature.
Great. And then Justin, there are no stupid questions. This is a very fair question. Justin asked, what is a rule? And yeah, I apologize. I've been using rule and regulation as synonyms. So really it's a state regulation that a state agency publishes and then would be responsible for enforcing. So we're talking about the natural gas industry rule. I really just mean natural gas industry regulation. And Anne just said we have 3 minutes, so I'll try to get to Lucy. So Lucy asked, what would be the effect, so I'm going to paraphrase here, what would be the effect on greenhouse gas emissions if households were required to separate compostable kitchen waste from other trash? That's a great question, because really the best way to control landfill methane, which derives from the breakdown of organic waste in the landfill by bacteria, the best way to address that is through organics diversion. It's really the only way to prevent it. Anything else is just a control measure. So these types of organics diversion efforts and hopefully regulations sometime soon are really the fundamental way to address landfill methane, because some people, it's a misnomer. Some people call it, oh, we have 1 minute here, so I'll wrap up with this. But some people call it landfill methane a renewable renewable energy source because you have waste and then you're deriving methane from that waste. And I believe that's a misnomer because compiling waste, piling it up in landfills is not a sustainable solution. So separating compostable kitchen waste from other trash is really the fundamental way to address the landfill methane issue. And then Liz's last question, the gas infrastructure and methane regulation was a long multi-year process, correct? How long for methane for landfills? Yes, it is an arduous process. And actually the landfill methane regulation process started in 2017 and was discontinued by federal regulations.
Welcome everyone. Thank you all so much for coming to our event this evening and joining me at this breakout session. My name is Callie and I'm one of Maryland's grassroots organizers this summer. And I grew up in Maryland my whole life, and I grew a great appreciation for the natural amenities that Maryland has to provide. And I truly believe that we have to keep fossil fuels out of Maryland so future generations can experience the same Maryland that I did. And so we must try to find ways to be resilient, building a movement that can sustain and thrive under any circumstance, because if we don't, it will be our environment that faces the consequences. And as you all know, just about every aspect of our lives have changed due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and organizing is no exception to that. Many of our most effective organizing methods are no longer feasible right now. This includes everything from in-person meetings, rallies, to our own work in the office. Social movements, however, must always be able to adapt to the changing circumstances. And when we are forced to be creative, new techniques emerge that bring something entirely new to the movement. So thanks to the technology available to us, CCAN and other movements have been able to make many new organizing opportunities more accessible than ever before. Now, anyone with access to a phone or computer can attend meetings and hearings without having to spend a whole day traveling to Baltimore or Annapolis. And so now I'm going to go over some strategies that myself and other CCAN staff have developed to make organizing and the time of COVID as effective as possible. So for our first slide, we're going to talk about what we like to call actions you can take from your couch. And so this includes everything from signing or promoting petitions, reaching out to your legislators or other elected officials via phone, email, or attending their town halls. Also LTEs, which are letters to the editor, and you can do this for your local paper or any other paper you see fit. And we also have a presentation on writing for advocacy. And if you all are interested in that, that is on our YouTube page and also on our website's volunteer page. And that will have some more information about the most effective ways for that kind of writing. And so we also have social media, such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and that's another great tool. In the following slide, we'll dive a little bit more into social media and some things you can do through that. Blog posts are another great way to get your personal story especially out there. CCAN's website has a whole blog section where CCAN activists and others can post about certain issues. But you can also do this on your own website, as well as find other blogs related to climate change issues. And so CCAN in the past, if you want to ever check out our blog posts, we have stuff ranging from a lot of different areas, from the relationship of climate change and COVID, to another blog we have written about climate podcasts. So lots of cool stuff to look at there. Also, participation in virtual hearings is another great opportunity. And so that can include testifying live or submitting written comments. I know Ryan Maher had mentioned a virtual hearing, and I think in the follow-up email, you all should get some more information about hearings that you would be able to attend as well. And so lastly on this slide, we have Outreach Circle, which is a great platform that we use to post quick and easy actions that you all can take. And it allows you to see all of these actions in one place, which makes it really accessible and easy. And so in an email prior to this event, we had sent out asking you all to set up your Outreach Circle accounts. And so for those of you who weren't able to do that ahead of time, we will be using that platform at the end of this breakout session to sign a petition. So we would love it if you could set that up now. And I will post a link in the chat. Give me one moment to send that for you all, if you have not been able to register for that already. And additionally, this is sort of the online platform if you were to do it on a computer, but there's also an app that I think the interface is better on that. So you can also download the app on the App Store. And again, that's just called Outreach Circle. And if you're doing it on the app, you'll want to search Maryland Climate Action to find CCAN. And those of you who are calling in right now who might not have access to that, there will be follow-up information sent about that in the email. So no worries if you aren't able to access Outreach Circle tonight. And speaking of actions that we're going to be taking tonight, in addition to the Outreach Circle action, at the end, we also want to take, at the end of this breakout session, we want to take a photo of everyone holding up their #SaveOurShore signs that we had asked you all to print out prior. And so I'll show you all mine right now. Mine is, oh, messing with my background, but there it is. Unfortunately, mine is in black and white. If you all weren't able to print those out ahead of time, we would love it if you all could just take a piece of paper and write something down along the lines of #SaveOurShore or no Eastern Shore Pipeline or something like that. We would really love, because we want to get a picture at the end of everyone holding up their signs. Awesome. All right, so this slide is talking about Facebook and Twitter primarily, and we have different ways that you can get involved through those mediums. So first, we would love if you shared any CCAN actions to any of your social media accounts. That can be petitions, emails, phone calls, etc. Another way to contact legislatures, besides the way I had mentioned on the previous slide, is through social media. You can do this by tweeting at them or messaging them through Facebook. Facebook is also an especially great platform for promoting events to drive turnout. While I've been at CCAN, you may have even seen my name pop up, as I have promoted certain CCAN events in related Facebook group pages. And CCAN itself will often promote other events from other groups. So if you all are interested in that, please reach out to us. And yeah, besides CCAN events, you all can promote any events by searching related Facebook groups, and that's a really great way to get the word out. We also have general education, and so this allows you to share the knowledge that you've gained, whether that's like attending seminars like this or your education, and you can share that with your followers and friends. And so you can post informational articles or infographics, and you can also share local news, and that includes the editorials, the letter to the editors, or op-eds. We also would love if you shared CCAN generated content, like I mentioned earlier. It's a great way for us to gain traction and reach people that we might not have otherwise. Yeah. And another great thing is if you are able to go to any sort of socially distanced event, or in the future, if you are able to go to any in-person events, live tweeting is a really great way to get the word out about that event going on. You can also live stream at those events. And again, that allows your followers to see what you are seeing and get the word out about that event. And on the line of Twitter, there's a technique called tweet storms, which is when you have a bunch of supporters tweet out at the same time in support or against something. And so CCAN has used this technique in the past, and we actually will be using it again before the Delmar Pipeline Board of Public Works vote, with the goal of pressuring the board to vote against approving the pipeline's wetland permit. So do look out for that and know that that is a cool technique you can use to get a rush of supporters to tweet out what they want. Sorry, I'm just reading the chat now. Post a link to the sign to print out. I honestly don't think I have a link to that, but no worries if you can just get your hands on a piece of paper. Again, that messes up my background. It's just no Eastern Shore pipeline or hashtag Save Our Shore. So next we're going to talk about creative actions, because this time is the time to get creative. We all know we've done it in our personal lives, and so we're taking that into our organizing as well. And so one creative action that CCAN has done is we did a car rally. And so we had cars decorated with demands for mail-in voting circle around Governor Hogan's mansion. And again, that was to pressure him to allow mail-in voting for the elections. So you can see a picture over here of a car that was decorated for that event. Another action that other groups have done has been chalk murals, and the example I have here is a picture of a Black Lives Matter mural chalked, and that is in Mobile, Alabama, and that was sponsored by Alabama Contemporary Arts Center. So next, we really want to hear from you all. We're looking for creative solutions in this trying time to continue the great work that we have all done together in the past. And so I made this Google sheet that we would love you all to write down some ideas that you may have in terms of creative ideas for organizing. And this can be things that you've seen other groups do during this time or things you come up with right now on the spot. And I will send a link to the Google Sheets in the chat. Oh, thanks, Stacy, for the Save Our Shore Signs link. Awesome. And while you all are filling that out, you also can raise your hand or just notify me somehow that you would like to speak, and we can have some people share their ideas out loud to get an idea about stuff going on there. Does anyone have any ideas they'd like to share for creative actions? I'm checking our sheets right now to see if anyone has put anything in. Can you all give me a thumbs up if you're able to have access to that Google Sheets?
Yeah, I could share something.
Awesome.
Yeah, nice to see everybody here. Some things that I feel like just on a personal level in my life, people have reached out to me, which has been really good, about starting like since we're living in a very socially distanced remote world, they've been trying to start these little online book clubs about certain topics they're interested in. And that just has impacted me in a way that I feel like to start doing actions to actually organize, people have to be aware of events going on, and then awareness will lead to different attitudes, and then I feel like from there action starts happening. So just doing everyday stuff to raise awareness. And I've seen creative solutions from other people, just walking down the street. A lot of people are having mats that have signs on them about different movements they're involved with. And I think there's just a lot of things we can do, just even remotely and without talking, to kind of share our ideas about what we think matters and what we can do about them.
That's great. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, if you wanted to put that in the Google Sheet, that would be really great. So that was 2 ideas right there. There was an idea for a virtual book club, as well as the idea for having masks display words or symbols for the political movements that you're interested in. Yeah, and for that Google Sheet, we have name, action ideas, additional notes, and contact info. Really only feel only pressure to fill out what you're comfortable with. You don't need to fill out your contact information unless that's an idea that you would want us to follow up with. But yeah, again, we really would like to hear from you all. So does anybody else have any ideas they would want to share? I've seen personally other artistic things going on right now. So other like art projects that people have done. And I mentioned the chalk mural earlier.
Yeah, hi. I was just thinking kind of along the same lines. There are a lot of artists, you know, not in the area where I live in Silver Spring. And I know, and you know, throughout Montgomery and Prince George's counties and other counties in the area. And maybe there's some way we could organize a virtual art show or an art contest, or I don't know, I'm not an artist myself, so I won't be contributing. But maybe there's some way to, you know, do something like that.
Yeah, I think art is a great medium right now because it's something we can all do in our own space. And at the very minimum, all you need is like a piece of paper. So yeah, I think that's a great idea. Anybody else? If we could get like maybe one more idea and then we'll move on. Even the action that we're going to be taking at the end, holding up our signs, that is another creative idea that we have. So holding up those signs, taking a picture, showing that we're all still united, you know, despite the circumstances. Anyone else have any ideas? All right, I think we will move on to the next slide then. And that Google Sheets will be shared with you all for a bit. So if you all have a chance to think about that some more and come up with anything, we would love for you all to add to that. Okay, so now we're going to actually take two actions that I had mentioned before. So first, you can see the picture on the right side. We are going to go on to Outreach Circle and sign that petition. That's the Board of Public Works pipeline petition. So I'll give you all a minute to do that, and maybe you all can just verbally say you're done or give me a thumbs up when you have completed that.
Alrighty, again, so thank you everybody for joining us this evening. We're going to be wrapping here in just a second. We're a little bit behind. I apologize for that. I hope everybody got something out of their respective breakout groups. I was in the legislative one, and I think we had some really good questions and a good back and forth between attendees and Delegate Charkoudian. Again, I'm very thankful that Ryan, the delegate, and Callie gave us their time this evening and their talents and their expertise to run these breakout sessions for y'all. And I hope it was great information for everybody. So now real quick, what does the future look like? So in the short term, we have a lot coming up, much of which was mentioned throughout the evening, such as the compressor station rulemaking hearing on August 31st, Maryland Department of the Environment hearing on September 17th, the Board of Public Works vote on September 23rd, all of which will have petitions and comments for you all to sign on to. All of this information I will include how to sign on to things, as well as how to RSVP for these hearings and sign up to comment. They'll all be included in a follow-up email I'll send out Friday. Additionally, I mentioned this a little bit at the beginning, but we'll begin forming action teams that will spearhead specific issues around Maryland, such as Potomac Pipeline Action Team, a legislative action team, and a public health and environmental justice action team. We will work to create structure and the ability to collaborate, communicate, and thrive together towards common goals. goals which will be discussed and decided on by members of those action teams, as well as CCAN staff, me, essentially. If you RSVP'd to this event, you may have already indicated your interest in certain teams, but if you haven't or want to add or change which teams you want to be involved with, you can always reach out to me. You do not have to limit yourself to one. You can be a part of multiple. For example, if you live on the Eastern Shore and you have a vested interest in fighting the Eastern Shore pipelines, you would want to be part of that action team. But if you want to focus specifically on the public health and the EJ issues around those pipelines, you may want to be a part of that action team as well. So again, I think that is all we have for you tonight. I just want to say thank you one last time and let everyone know that this is just the beginning, as I mentioned before. I can't wait to see what changes we can bring in this state together. And I'm so happy that we'll have an opportunity to collaborate and share ideas and resources in the future. So keep an eye out for our follow-up email. Again, I'm sorry for getting us out here a few minutes late, but that is all we have for you this evening. So good night, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my